So hello and welcome everyone. We start with the best of greetings, the greetings of peace for everyone. Thank you for joining us in this beautiful event. The name of this event is Together in Trying Times. It's a collaborative event between the OCADU Jewish Club, the OCAD InterVarsity Club, and the OCADU MSA. And it's an interfaith panel that will shed light on perspectives from the Christian faith, the Muslim faith, and the Jewish faith. And we all, each of us from different faiths, have brought in one representative to discuss this issue. And so the main event itself will be two parts. The first part will be a 1-hour discussion where each representative is going to have 5 minutes for the first two questions to give their perspective from their representative faith. And then after the 1-hour discussion, then we'll be having a Q&A, which will be 30 minutes long. And if you have any questions for any of the speakers at any time, feel free to send it in the chat. So without further ado, we'll begin. And we'll begin with introductions of each of the speakers. So I will start by introducing Shiekh Amjad, which is the representative from the Muslim faith. Shiekh Amjad has been a part of several TV and radio shows in Jordan and across the Arab world. He has completed a PhD in comparative religions and interfaith relations from the University of Birmingham in the UK, and a master's degree in Quranic exegesis from the University of Jordan. He has served as an associate professor in comparative religions at the Faculty of Islamic Studies at the University of Jordan. He is currently a resident scholar, lecturer, and family consultant at the Dar Foundation in Oakville, while also being happily married with five children. So welcome, Shiekh Amjad, to this event. And now I'll pass it over. Now I'll pass it over to Yael to introduce her representative, and then afterwards Evan to introduce his representative, and then we'll start with the first question.
Hi everyone, thank you all for coming. I'm really happy to introduce my rabbi, Rabbi Stephen Berger, a teacher at my former high school. 15 years of leadership and professional experience in formal and informal Jewish education. He's a UCLA grad and received his rabbinical ordination at a yeshiva in Israel, where he spent 7 years studying. Previous to his current position at King David High School in Vancouver, BC, he was the director for Jewish Life. He is a director for Jewish Life there, and he was the regional leader for the National Congregation of the Synagogue of Youth in various Canadian and American cities. He currently lives in Vancouver with his wife, Sarah, who is from New Zealand, and they have 5 kids with 2 sets of twins.
And following that, if I may introduce Pastor Paul, which is also my own dad, if I may read out his bio right here. Paul's a graduate of Queen's University and Heritage Theological Seminary. For the last 6 years, he has served as leader pastor of Grace Baptist Church of Richmond Hill. Before that, he ministered as a missionary church planter in Japan for 15 years, and he is a published author with numerous articles in the Evangelical Missions Quarterly and Japan Harvest. And he posts regularly at Out of Neutral and on YouTube. Together with his wife, Jennifer, he has a daughter and 2 sons, and enjoys running, soccer, guitar, and playing Smash Brothers with his kids.
Perfect. Thank you all for joining us. I know our rabbi is calling all the way from Vancouver, so thank you for reaching all the way across the many provinces to be here today. And so we'll begin. So the first question I would like to address, and each speaker has 5 minutes for this question. So when your 5 minutes is over, we'll send a message on the chat to remind you. And then we'll move on to the next speaker. So the first question I would like to address Shiekh Amjad first, and then I'll have him pass it on to the next representative, is as a community leader or representative of the Muslim faith, what is something you have done that has had a meaningful impact on your community before COVID or pre-pandemic?
To be honest with you, one of the things that I feel that God has guided me to, and I can call it a meaningful, which I'm doing, by the way, since 35 years exactly and literally, because I started teaching when I was doing my first year in the BA. I used to teach inside the masjid from that time. Professionally, I taught about 19 years with a degree, but generally I'm teaching since 35 years. So the most important thing I believe it was, and it is meaningful, which is correcting misconceptions about the religion for Muslims themselves. One of the most meaningful, I felt happy when I'm used by God to help the people to remove the misunderstanding. Those people who were misled, those people who had misconception, any specific in their relation with God Almighty, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I met big number of people for many reasons, like for example, misunderstanding the concept of evil. Sometimes people, the idea of evil, which is one of the biggest problems why some people are atheists. So they feel unhappy, why God is allowing such and such, why God decided to do such and such. When I feel that I'm, fixing these things and helping them to understand what, when, why, depending on what, and I help them to reconnect with God and help them to enjoy the relation with God and then to feel happy while practicing their faith. This is the most important thing I used, and I still, and I hope will keep having the feeling of doing something meaningful. Now, I think 2.5 minutes. In the other 2.5 minutes, now the other meaningful thing, to the best of my knowledge, since before, actually, maybe you will be amazed, you will ask me how old I am. Actually, since 37 years, I'm doing family counseling, starting with my parents. Helping them when they have, some kind of misunderstanding for whatever reason. So since 35 years, I'm helping in family counseling and marriage counseling in specific, even before I myself became a married person. So really, you can't imagine how happy I feel when God is using me to fix a problem between husband and wife or between parents and their kids. Now, one of the main reasons why I feel that, because in Islam, now, keeping, maintaining, taking care of the relation between husband and wife is one of the most sacred things in Islam, after worshiping God and after, believing in God and worshiping God to a degree. And in my last minute, to a degree, in the Holy Quran, our sacred book, the second chapter, which is the biggest chapter, it's called the cow. It's mentioned, magic is mentioned. Magic, dealing with magic, accepting magic, the black magic in Islam is considered an act which is close to committing blasphemy. It's an act of very prohibited things, illegal, completely prohibited, and it's a major sin. When God mentioned magic as the first time in our holy book, the example that God mentioned for what magicians are doing as an evil act, the only example that God mentioned, that they do break the ties between husband and wife. To show you that, out of tens of evil things that magicians might be doing, I'm not talking about these simple tricks. I'm talking about real magic. Okay. So when I feel that I'm doing something which really goes against those who do break these things, really I feel it's meaningful. 5 minutes. Finito.
Thank you so much, Shiekh Amjad. I'll pass it over to whoever would like to, whichever panelist would like to go first.
Go ahead, Pastor, please.
All right.
So I'm also going to avoid talking about COVID for a minute, and I think because we're talking about the theme of trying times, I want to talk about another period of my ministry, and it's a way of illustrating a little bit about a time, but also about my ministry, and then I think the impact of the church as a whole. So next Thursday will be the 10th anniversary of the triple disaster in Japan. I was serving as a missionary in a high-tech research city, and I was about 250 kilometers from the Fukushima nuclear plant that went into meltdown. Most of you probably are aware of the earthquake that hit, the tsunami waves destroyed many coastal towns. And we were close enough to feel the impact, but far enough to be spared any long-term effects. What we did as a church and myself as a community leader traveled with a team of other Christians, and we first began just some basic relief work. We were clearing mud and sludge from homes that had been completely filled with seawater. Probably the biggest moment that stood out from that day, I remember the tears of a piano teacher as we carried her grand piano out into the street to be picked up as garbage. And at that stage, the feelings were so raw, all that we could really offer was physical labor. After that, we continued to make trips, particularly over the first 2 to 3 months. We were delivering supplies. We collected school backpacks from for the start of school in April. We provided other equipment for those who were living in shelters. But about 3 months into the recovery, I went out for dinner with a community leader. And I was asking him what he felt the next steps were. And I still remember what he said. He said, at first, we were numb from all the loss. We needed help physically. And then we scrambled to get supplies. But now we have stuff. He said, but we need to give people hope. We need to give people a reason to live. And that the focus of our ministry took a turn around that phase of the recovery. So we initially responded by putting on what we called a baseball tournament of hope. We had a batting clinic, and we did these fun baseball-themed activities. We brought in a professional baseball player who spoke about how his faith gave him hope, how it gave him peace, as he had come as a teen to come and trust in Jesus, and it was our attempt to begin to speak hope into the youth that were a part of that. We continued to build on that event. We partnered with other local Christians who started to put on kids clubs and community meetings for adults. And really the goal was to provide a place for people to talk and laugh, but also to learn that there is hope in a relationship with God who loves us and wants to know us personally. And I share that as an example because I feel it represents a snapshot of kind of how I see impact in my own ministry and the ministry of the Christian church. There are physical needs that we meet, and there are ways that we respond materially to people who are in crisis. But I feel that the biggest impact that we make is in the hope that we offer in Jesus Christ. And when we believe that when somebody has an unshakable hope, they can endure a lot in life. They can deal with a lot. They can go through a lot. But without hope, whatever comes at you, even small things become very big. And so, yeah, it is on that basis of hope that I measure meaningful impact. Over to Rabbi Berger.
Thank you so much
Hi.
for these touching experiences. Yeah, go ahead. Rabbi,
Yeah, it's
go ahead.
powerful stories. Clearly all religions here are all about hope. And, it's wonderful to be able to be sparked like that. It was fantastic. I would say the biggest achievement I think we've tried to accomplish is probably the simplest of one, is that the main job of a rabbi, if I could say it perhaps in a very short, pithy way, is to make people who are uncomfortable, to make them comfortable, and to make people who are comfortable a little uncomfortable. And that kind is the way I kind of run my life in that sense, is that people who are a little too comfortable with themselves, they need to be pushed out of their comfort zones and grow and be able to see that there's more to life than what they're living right now. And people who are a little too uncomfortable, they're not at the moment, they can begin to feel that, and they need to feel that sense of hope and the comfort and the marriage things. The way I look at life is such that, and this is, I think, as a teacher and a father, is that you have two jobs in life. It's planting and building. And there's certain things you can build, and there's other things that you have to plant seeds for. And I would say, as a community member, the biggest thing that I do is I plant a lot of seeds. And I think that we don't always get to see where those seeds go, but in any community, one of the greatest tragedies of humanity, in a sense, or one of the biggest challenges, you might say, is the fact that we're only here for a very short period of time. And we spend, a whole part of that time just beginning to learn and grow and develop. And then when we're actually mature enough, there's not that many years that we're actually here to make an impact upon the world. And you have to, the job is, if there's one generation that misses out on something, that generation's kind of lost. The Holocaust was a tragedy because of the 6 million Jews that died in it. But perhaps even the bigger tragedy was a whole generation of people didn't get to know the generation before them. And it's very hard to pass on all that beauty and the love and the meaning and those values if the people aren't there, if the grandparents aren't there, if the parents aren't there to pass it on to their kids. And I think that's what I call the most meaningful thing that I can do, is I can pass those things on. And I've been in teaching now long enough to see people like Yael here who's running this. And I can see people who've started nonprofit organizations and people that have gone out there, and former students that have gone out there and taken these ideas that I made them feel a little uncomfortable. And they realize that their job is to make people comfortable. And I would say that might be, I think, if I look back, again, I haven't finished a career yet. But as far as the biggest impact I've had on my community is actually the ability to make community and realize the power of community. And community doesn't just happen by itself. And we can't just leave it to chance. And therefore, really working to develop all the things that the prior people spoke about, but really in this essence of realizing that we have to actively build community. There's a long road to this, and we all have to continue working on that road. And then when we're done, someone's going to pick up the mantle and take it after us. So that's really what I consider to be perhaps my greatest contribution to community and the sense of community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rabbi. I owe a lot of my motivation for what I do to my high school education and King David's curriculum, and especially your curriculum as well.
Oh, thank you.
So I'll pass it over to Yael for the next question. You can add on another few minutes, because I think we're making really good time. I didn't think everybody would be so so on time and on point, but thank you. That's very respectful of you guys all.
The next question we wanted to ask is, what is a common misconception about your respective faith? I can pass it on to whoever is ready to share. Maybe Shiekh Amjad. Oh, I think you're muted if you're talking.
Okay, thank you very much. From my personal experience, maybe the most common 3 or 4 misconceptions about my faith, basically, that women in Islam are oppressed, and why women have to wear the hijab or the headscarf, and Islam was spread by sword, and Muslims are terrorists. You see, so wherever you go, you find one of these, especially, when you discuss, someone is highlighting one of these. This is the most common. Even though with the help of my Lord, I speak about myself, wherever I had the chance to explain for the people, Muslims and non-Muslims, religious and non-religious, when I explain to them facts, knowledge, information, historical contexts, authentic knowledge, okay? And I show sometimes how the media, they try to bet. And sometimes, you know, we have problems from how politicians, they are, you know, playing the dirty game to gain. Like, for example, what happens in France now. You know, Macron is going completely against the basics of secularism, of French secularism, you know, in the way how provoking the people against, you know, generalizing. So I explain, when I speak about women are oppressed, one of the things that I used to, whenever I had the chance to explain, the majority, to my memory, they say thank you, we didn't know. So I discovered this is the most main conceptions, and the majority of people, they are misled. Literally, they are misled, specifically by the media. And because time is limited, or otherwise, I could have told you about some amazing story happened to me, you know, with the CBC in the United States, with the BBC Arabic, because I'm a media person as well. And I do have, you know, interviews in different channels in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, in Lebanon, and the United States. So I tell you how the media, they were misusing and cutting pieces. I said, oh my God, it's me. But I did not say this. But, you know, the news is completely, and I said something else, and it happened. So one of the things that I used to reply when they say women are oppressed, I said, look, you tell me something. In Europe, I lived 6 years in the UK, and I knew from the head of the Special Council of European Muslims more than 20 years ago, for many years, that 75% of those who convert to Islam, basically they are women. So when you see this number, you will ask yourself something. Europeans, they are proud that they have freedom of speech, freedom of thinking, freedom of everything. When 75% out of every 10, they decide to become Muslims, they did it on a free thinking basis. So if you want to, so when I argue with them, I say, why they go? Because when they discover the reality of Islam, they discover how many lies, you know, are made, especially by the media and politicians, against Islam. Now, the other one, the hijab. I always am asked, why do they have? What is the importance of this? This misconception, I always, you know, in a very quick way, I say, in Islam, we don't have the concept of hijab as a piece of headscarf. No. Hijab, it's a package. It's a concept of modesty. It's a head covering. It's a body covering. It's not using outside the makeup and the perfume. It's a way of talking and a way of walking. It's a package of dealing and maintaining the sexuality of the woman when dealing with stranger. It's not a piece of cloth in the head. So when I explain it for the people, and many people, they don't notice, I say, hey, have you noticed the nuns in Christianity? Even in the Orthodox Jews, you know, the conservative Jews, they don't wear just like the nuns. Even they have the face cover, which we call it the niqab. You can see them. There are thousands of them. I said, it's not an Islamic invention. It's a godly commandment, which exists in Judaism and Christianity and in Islam. And the other one, Islam was spread by sword, which is, you know, one of the most, and Muslims are terrorists. Now, you know, when I bring numbers and I compare between the First World War, Second World War, China, what happened when it was established, Mao Zedong, when I speak about Stalin, Lenin, and I compare it with the 23 years of Prophet Muhammad, 10 years of establishing his state, with the casualties of less than 200, I say, you tell me, when Prophet Muhammad conquered Mecca, who basically kicked him out and killed his followers, and they did and that, simply he freed all of them with one word. When he said his first word, "Idhabu fa antum at-tulaqa," you are free to go, and he forgave all of them. So my point, because I have just, I think, half a minute or I finished my time, the most I discovered that even though this is the most misconceptions I always face, but I discovered as well, the majority of people, once they know the truth from an authentic source, they go back and they discover that they are misled and brainwashed. Finished my time. Sorry, I'm not speaking exactly what I want to say because I'm restricted with the time, so I'm sorry. I hope that I answered the question.
If Pastor Paul, if you wanted to answer the question, please feel free.
Sure. Just hearing, I am sure that each of us on this panel could put on a day-long seminar about all of the misconceptions we feel people have about our faith. And if there's ever a topic that wants to get all of us excited, this is probably one of them. I'm going to try and clarify what I feel is the biggest and also the most important misconception. And I'm going to try and do it with 3 equations. Now, I'm guessing that most people don't go to OCADU because they love math, but I'm hoping these equations will be helpful to you and may hopefully clarify what I think is a big misconception. So the first equation I'm going to give you describes my life when I was a university student. And the equation is works, and I'll explain what this means in a moment, but works equals salvation. When I was a university student, I wouldn't have used an equation to describe it, but without any exposure to faith or the Bible or Christianity or any other religion for that matter, I would have told you that what I do, or what I've called works here, is what determines my success and my happiness in this life and probably the next as well. I tried to be a good person and work hard, and I assumed that God would smile on me if I did. And I had the misconception that that was Christianity, and it isn't. So the first equation, works equals salvation. The second equation adds a religious element. It says works, or the things that we do, plus faith equals salvation. So this equation says that the good that I try to do isn't quite good enough to please God if I reject him or ignore him. So in order to find success and happiness in this life and probably blessing in the next, I try my best to please God and trust in God to help me over the line. So I do my part, he does his part, and together we end up in a place of happiness we call salvation. This equation, as I've come to see, describes the approach of, or it feels to me as it describes the approach of many religions. And many people I find try to impose this equation on the Bible and come up with a Christian version of it. But it's a misconception that this is Christianity. It isn't. Even if you fill in, for the works part, a bunch of things that the Bible says these are things to do, and add faith, and you talk about it in Jesus terms, and salvation, you're talking about it in using biblical language, it still is not the Christian message, and it's a misconception, I believe, of what Christianity is. So I've given you works equals salvation. That was me as a university student. Works plus faith equals salvation. That was how the grid that some people will try to put on Christianity. And then the third equation is what I believe represents the Christian message. And that equation is faith equals salvation plus works. And let me try and explain what that means. The Bible doesn't teach that just trying to do more good things than bad things will actually solve anything. Starting back in the garden with Adam and Eve, with the fruit, the warning is that if you eat of it, you will surely die. So the penalty of sin is death. And the scriptures teach that the greatest commandments are to love God, love your neighbor. The problem is that we've all fallen short of those commands. And just trying harder to erase the penalty for what we've already done is not something we can do. And so, again, just trying to even out the good and the bad, trying to erase the bad that we've done with the good is not a solution. So that would have put us in a very hopeless situation, we would have been condemned to separation from God forever. And without God, we get worse, we don't get better. And so he provided salvation as a free gift that we receive by faith. On the cross, we believe Jesus took the penalty for our sins so that by trusting in him, we would make peace with God and not only receive salvation, but also receive a new heart, a new desires, new motivation to do good works. And so that's why I'm talking about that faith equaling salvation plus works. When a person receives love, it changes them. And we believe that on the cross, God showed the fullness of his love in that Jesus took the penalty for our sins and showed us in his sacrifice for us the fullness of love. And we are changed by that love. There's a verse in the Bible that says, we love because he first loved us. So Christianity doesn't teach that works equal salvation or works plus faith equals salvation. It teaches that faith in Jesus Christ equals salvation plus works. And I don't know if I succeeded, but I think that's a big misconception and one that I'd love for people to have a clear picture of what Christianity teaches.
Thank you, Pastor. Rabbi Berger, do you have anything to share?
Sure. Very interesting ideas, both of you. So there's a lot of misconceptions about Jews. First, that we control all the media, and we take blood libels, you name it. We've lived in a world of misconceptions where a lot of bad things have happened. Anti-Semitism formed on a lot of misconceptions. I don't really want to get into those. Matter of fact, what I really like to get into is I think it's a misconception not just with the non-Jewish world, but I think many of my Jewish students as well. It's a misconception of the idea of the Jewish people being what's called the chosen people. And that's one of the things that, by the way, people are very uncomfortable with on all sides. And my Jewish students are very uncomfortable with the idea of a chosen people. And then obviously a lot of anti-Semitism has also come from the idea of that you're a chosen people. And there's and scholars on basically in the Muslim world and scholars in the Christian world have had to deal with this concept, have answered up of why the Jews are still here and all the other things that go along with this idea of chosenness and now unchosenness, etc. I'd like to try to clarify a little bit. What does the idea in Judaism, what does the idea of chosenness mean? And I'm going to right off the bat just say it's not about being better. It has nothing to do with being better or privileged. The Torah itself, the 5 books of Moses, the Old Testament referred to, the idea is that when God is referring to the Jewish people in the time of Exodus, he refers to the Jewish people being born at that moment of Exodus as God's firstborn, which I think is a very important term because it clarifies so much. In other words, a firstborn is only the firstborn. It's not that you hate all other children. I mean, first of all, there are other children. You're just the first of the children, right, in a sense. But there's a whole slew of children after that. And if we just take a look at the normal challenges that face, for example, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses and the book of Genesis we just finished reading before we got into this, we saw the problems of families that put one child in front of the other. It's a disaster, leading into even selling one into slavery, right? Kidnapping and selling. So the idea very clearly is being seen that there's not this idea that therefore God loves one more than the other. But the firstborn child has a particular job. And I'll give an example. This parallels with why is it that God decided to destroy all the firstborns of Egypt. In other words, it's a flip. We're about to celebrate Passover and the whole retelling of the story. And we all know the 10th plague is this idea of destroy. Why would you destroy the firstborn? Because it's a particular role of the firstborn. The particular role of the firstborn is to teach what mom and dad want to the rest of the younger siblings. that really is the job of the firstborn. And by the way, science now shows that the tendencies and the IQs and everything from a firstborn is actually very different than the other kids as well. Again, not a better, just different. And the idea being is that there's certain responsibilities, and you're there to teach, what does God want? What does mom and dad want for the rest of the people? And he gave that mission to a particular people to bring those ideas into the world. And Judaism strongly believes that each and every other religion, each and other society has something else that God wants to bring into the world. It's just not, that's not the Jewish job. The Jewish job is to bring the ideas that were listed in the Old Testament, to live a life of holiness and nationhood, to merge those things, a holy nation, to live those things together, put them together, and be an example to the rest of the people in that area. And that's what it means, chosen. It doesn't mean better, right? It doesn't mean privileged. What it means is you have a deal there to teach those ideas that God wanted to bring into the world at that moment, and those eternal values, and make sure the rest of the world understands them. They don't have to be Jews. One thing that makes Judaism very different is that we actually don't proselytize. We don't convert. You can be a full citizen of the world and have a full relation with God without even being Jewish. But if you choose to be Jewish, there's a particular set of rules that you follow and a particular set of guidelines that to help you fulfill your mission as to be, in a sense, the firstborn. And that really is, I think, hopefully that's a clarity of that particularly difficult concept that's both difficult, again, to the non-Jewish world, but even to the very Jewish world today, this idea of privilege has become so prominent in our world today. It's not an idea of privilege. It's an idea of responsibility, really.
Thank you, Rabbi. Evan.
Yeah, now, sorry that we only had 5 minutes for that question. I know you must have wanted much more time for that, but the next question you'll have 10 minutes each to talk about, if I may read it out. How has COVID-19 had an impact on you and your community in the areas of death, prayer, spiritual growth, and holidays, celebrations? And how does one deal with these challenges and still be faithful? Whoever wants to go first, feel free to unmute and speak up.
Maybe I should go first this time since I've gone last times. So I mean, COVID for us, like COVID for everybody, has a tremendous impact upon everybody. I'm working mostly with students at this point. I would say that COVID I've seen hit two people tremendously that I service. One is the high school students, is that they can't be with friends any longer. They're no longer socializing. And I am with certain kids that have an upper mobility, many of them, and a lot of the things that they would love to do, the traveling, the trips, the events, they've just been unable to do. And that's put them in a little bit of a high risk depression. And I've seen a lot more mental challenges with them. Another group that I've seen that has really affected them is the first year college students, university students. Is that they've been impacted because I've seen one is that they wanted to get ready for their college experience. They really have never had a college experience, so they're kind of unsure about this whole thing. And now they're all taking classes online, and they're not even visiting universities, and that whole life and they're not with their friends any longer. So they're kind of a fish out of water. And they've also been tremendously challenged by such things. And I've been running a lot of Zoom and talking and workshops for those particular groups of people. If I could say some potentially positive things, I've seen families stronger because of such a thing. The difficult families, the families that had difficult problems, they've exacerbated those problems and realized that they actually have to get help. But the families that are strong, the COVID in many ways, unless you had a tragedy that affected you, particularly of someone getting it and being seriously ill or passing away, I've noticed that a lot of families have gotten a lot stronger, a lot more family time than I've ever seen before, and a lot of less distractions. And you might think it's interesting is that people are saying, people want to be online, but the reality is people are done. Like ratings on TV shows, ratings on football, ratings on everything are actually down. And people don't want to be online so much anymore. They're missing those personal relationships. And I think that there's a real challenge here, or a real opportunity. I think people, and it isn't just the Trump, and it isn't just the situation we're in, but there's been a lot of upheaval in our world about thinking about what's important, right? From the economics, from the environment. The kids have been focused much more on these things, right? About social emotional health, about racism. We've seen demonstrations. We've seen all sorts of things kind of come to almost a boiling point in this area. And I think there's a real opportunity here to grow and to develop and I've seen it to take more further classes and build on this. But I see this going in one of two directions. And Rabbi Sachs pointed this out in one of his books called Morality. And he said something which I think is very important for us to know, and I will end on this particular point, is that he says, there was a great pandemic, the Spanish flu. And he said after that came right after World War I, where tremendous lives were lost. And then you had the recovery right afterwards. And what did we have after? We had the great Roaring 20s. What was the Roaring 20s? The Roaring 20s was this time to just let loose and be free. It was like, forget about all that horrible stuff that happened in the past. Let's just go out there and have nothing but a good time. And they just celebrated and traveled and you name it, and it was done there. At the time of decadence. And then you had World War II, and you had the tremendous death of World War II. And after World War II, you had a soul searching of also great death, destruction, and wondering what we're going to do now. And after World War II, we saw a whole bunch for the 50s, 40s, and 50s. We saw social programs. We saw civil rights movements. And we've seen a whole bunch of things pop out of that time that really people were unhappy with it, and they wanted social change. And I think that puts us in a certain crossroads here, looking at the past, is that this COVID has the potential of being a speed bump. That we could have just we had a tremendous decadent life before, and now we've just had to stop and where we can get back to ourselves a little bit. And then when it's over, we could just hit the gas and just keep going in that way that we've been heading and just forget about everything that happened and let's just build the economy and have great things again and a lot more fun. Or we can actually use this moment as a moment of reflection and actually use this to recalibrate and relook at our society in things. And I think that is perhaps hopefully the legacy that COVID leaves us. And again, not to say in any capacity that's why people had to die for such a thing, because I would never say such a, nor do I want to connect the two. What I'm saying is that these things, these great upheavals, do force us to look at our lives and look at things in a very different way. And I'm hoping those inner looks that we've all started will continue, and they won't give away to our more base natures, our more pleasure natures, and that we just kind of ignore it. And then let's just get back to everything business as usual. And that's my hope for COVID. And I think that we've been working on it to kind of take meaning out of these moments, and to make sure that these moments aren't just a happenstance or a one-off, that the people take it back into their lives and now find some way to incorporate this new soul searching into a regular everyday thing. So.
Thank you, Rabbi Berger. Now, Dr. Amjad or Paul, if you would like to answer the question.
Paul, please, you can start. I started the first twice, so it's your turn.
All right, no problem. Okay, I think what I'll do is start by, maybe I'm starting on a positive note. I'm starting by describing some of the ways that COVID-19 hasn't had an impact on our community in the areas that you mentioned. And because I think it reveals something about our faith. So I believe that Christianity in its essence is a very diverse faith, and it was deliberately created to be adaptable. So we see ourselves as continuing the blessing given to Abraham, and that was a blessing to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. And Jesus called us to make disciples of all nations. And so from the beginning, Christianity was designed to work in harmony with all of the diverse cultures of the world. Because of that, the New Testament mostly describes function rather than form. It tells us what to do, not how to do it. So for instance, we're called to pray and taught about the nature of prayer, but we're not given specific rules about when or where to pray. And I mention that because when COVID came and we went into lockdown, before that, our prayer gatherings as a church, we would meet on Wednesday mornings and Wednesday evenings. We had a couple of groups gathering. But since the pandemic, our prayer numbers have actually grown. We can't gather anymore, but we've transitioned those prayer gatherings online. Now we have 4 prayer meetings happening virtually. And it's given us an ability to gather people, connect people in prayer that we might not have otherwise had an opportunity to do. Also, what I mentioned about function over form relates to holidays and celebrations as well. As Christians, one of our basic commitments is that the Bible is our highest authority. But in a particular culture, certain traditions are going to develop typically. But even as traditions develop, we believe that we're only bound by what the scriptures actually teach. So for instance, many Christians around the world have traditions around Christmas and Easter. But strictly speaking, those are cultural practices infused with religious meaning. And what I mean by that is the Bible never commands people to set up Christmas trees or sing Silent Night. There's no Christmas, Good Friday, or Easter festival commanded in the Bible for us to celebrate. They're just traditions that we've developed to celebrate the 3 most significant events in the New Testament. So Christmas celebrates the Son of God coming into our world to rescue us. Good Friday celebrates him dying on the cross for our sins. Easter celebrates him rising from the dead as our Savior and Lord. And we've come to love gathering to celebrate those amazing historical events. But since the question was how we deal with these challenges and still be faithful, I just wanted to say with Christianity, faithfulness isn't really at stake. We enjoy the celebrations, but ultimately they're not prescribed for us. So I've touched on prayer, holidays. Death is a little bit more difficult. Maybe death is a lot more difficult. As an example, over the last 6 weeks, I've been ministering to a family whose husband, father came down with a severe and sudden blood disease. Hospital visits limited to 1 family member twice a week for 2 hours at a time. So almost from the first night, he went into a medically induced coma, but eventually it was too much and he passed away on Sunday evening. I'm going to lead a funeral and a burial service on Saturday morning. All of that has taken place with only 1 family member has been the only one to have access through that time, and very little ability for people to have touch support, giving hugs and offering that up close and personal support. And so for instance, on Saturday, only 30 people will be able to attend the funeral service. And we understand that, we get it, we accept the restrictions as necessary and we're grateful for them. But it's so hard to face the death of a loved one when most of the people in your life are at a distance. Going back to my earlier point, the Bible doesn't give us prescriptions for how to mark someone's passing. And so it's not so much there's a particular form, but the support and comfort of the family of God is, I think, for all of our communities, incredibly powerful at times of loss, and we feel the lack of it. And because of the pandemic, we're a lot more limited in what we can do. So the 4th thing that you asked about was spiritual growth, and I have deliberately left that one to the end because in some ways I feel it's the hardest topic. Like most other groups, I assume we're offering online sermons, online worship music. We have online groups for Bible study, prayer, and encouragement. And people can still study the Bible and pray individually. And we all remind ourselves it's really wonderful that we can still do all of those things, and it is. But I do fear the spiritual casualties that the pandemic will surface. Instead of grieving the loss, I fear that some people are celebrating the convenience. Having spent half of my ministry in Asia, the thing I've learned about myself as a Canadian and other Canadians is that we love our independence and we love our individualism. We like privacy. We're not so big on obligations to other people. And that's culturally what we were like before the pandemic. And I just feel that our isolation right now is feeding into that. So I think that, for instance, totally honest, I think there are many people who love doing church in their pajamas. But if that becomes normal, we'll have lost something really essential to our faith. Jesus calls us to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, but he also calls us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And I think the temptation of Canadians is to think they can love God, but keep to themselves. And the isolation of the pandemic gives us an excuse to do just that. And if that's the lesson of COVID-19, I just feel we will have lost something really important. So that's my fear. That's my downer in talking about COVID. My hope, I guess, is that our isolation will convince us how much we really need each other. And so my prayer is that we'll come from the pandemic with a deeper commitment to love. I pray that we'll be more concerned with our neighbors, more committed to one another, and hopefully more invested in each other's lives.
Thank you very much. Dr. Amjad, if you would like to finish us with this question.
I think he just left the meeting. Let us give it a minute or so.
Yeah, his screen looked like it was frozen, so it may have.
If any of you guys would like to expand on any of your points until we have Shiekh Amjad back with us, feel free to jump in. Let me just send you a message. I guess I'll just add my 2 cents as we wait for him. I think your point, Pastor, about communities is really the essence of why we're having this event here. Oh, Shiekh Amjad is back. Shiekh Amjad, I was about to speak a little bit, but please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Something happened with the Wi-Fi. I don't know what is it, and the computer completely disconnected.
No problem at all. So the floor is yours now to answer the last question. Yeah.
Okay. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Pastor Paul, for your words. Now, the impact of the COVID-19 on my community in the areas of death, prayer, spiritual growth, and holidays and celebration. This is a big challenge to talk about these things in 10 minutes, wallahi. Yes. Okay. Now, I want just to establish some important basic things has to do with how many Muslims think in terms of faith. Now, apart from those who believe in conspiracy theory, apart from those who believe that Bill Clinton is cooperating with the Freemasons to reduce the number of the population on Earth, apart from those who believe that the vaccine is used by some governments to blah, 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 apart from all this. Now, from Islamic point of view, when something happened, which is big, major, one of the questions that we always ask ourselves, as long as it's part of God's fate, and we, the ordinary people, we are facing it, and it is a reality. We are witnessing those who became sick. We are witnessing those who live their lives, and we are losing our beloved ones. Okay. And many of us, the only thing that we are able to do, just wear masks, social distancing, cleaning our hands, etc. Yet we are losing thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, which means death. So we are witnessing tens and hundreds of times of our normal way of deaths. So from Islamic point of view, we do ask the question, what could be part of the divine message? Now, in my understanding, the impact on the area of death, I think God is sending a message to humanity and to us as Muslims from Islamic point of view to tell us the following. Now, in my words, you know, in Islam, death is a very important concept because death is the gate between the worldly life and the beginning of the hereafter. Now, beginning of the hereafter in Islam means all of your deeds, all of what you should have already done and something, your file is closed, which means now you will be starting an area that there is no returning point from it. And depending on your 50, 20, 60 years, you will face an eternal life of either or. Either the paradise, may God grant all of you the paradise, or God forbid the other one, which is the hellfire. This is part of the Islamic faith. So death is very important. Remembering death is very important in Islam. Being ready for not death itself, for what comes after death, which is the most important reality, is something very basic in Islam. However, many Muslims, even though they claim that they are faithful Muslims, concept of death is missed. They don't think about it. They don't consider it. They don't bring it to their desktops. They don't maximize it on their laptops. Completely, it's always minimized. I don't want to think, but it is very important. It's the end. It's the beginning of accountability. So, from this angle, to be honest with you, from faith point of view, in what we are not able to control, which is completely God's decision, okay? I said the impact of death, COVID-19 made many believers aware of one of the most important realities that many of them used not to think about it, which is death. Now, when we come to prayer, now connecting with the first point, even though Muslims in general, in Islamic literature, in Islamic faith, we are highly encouraged to pray what we call the jama'ah, or the collective prayer, which means to do it either in collective prayer inside homes, and the most highly recommended is to go to the mosques or the masjid to pray in a collective. And it has a meaning of collaboration, brotherhood, being close, seeing each other, you know, many other things. Now, many people, they take it for granted that this is, okay, it's not a big deal. Why should I go? To give you an example, for example, Oakville, in Oakville where I work, there's 10,000 Muslims, which is, you know, small number relatively speaking compared with Mississauga where I live. By the way, Mississauga, some Canadians, they call Mississauga Arab Saga. Okay, but going back to Oakville now. Now in Oakville, 10,000 Muslims around a mosque. Now the average of those who pray the Fajr, which is the morning prayer, and the Isha, which is the late night prayer, the average is 50. So out of 10,000, those who pray the Jum'ah ceremony, those who pray in normal times before COVID, they are around 1,000 to 1,300, for example. So you are talking about 90% of Muslims, they do not attend the collective prayer for many reasons. They take it easy. When COVID came and they became by law, it's prohibited to gather, when they were deprived from an act of worship, which is basic in their religion. Now, because of COVID, it became illegal to go there. It's illegal to attend the place. It's illegal to gather. It's illegal to socialize. When they felt that this treasure, the collective prayer, being close from the other, knowing the news of your prayer, you might be deprived and it will be deleted from your system. They felt how precious, how important, how you know, in their lives. So they started to the degree when they have this kind of gradual opening, 30% and on, or sometimes just 10 gathering for churches and mosques and synagogues, they start fighting online to reserve their places. Now, many of them, they used not to care. They became now asking tens of times, when you will open the reservation book online? I don't want to lose my place to pray. So from this angle, amazingly, I can tell you, I'm witnessing the impact of this amazingly. Now, with regard to spiritual growth, now the challenge was really very big. People, because of the lockdown, they found themselves just not allowed to move. To be honest with you, many families, they came to know each other inside their own homes because of COVID. Many fathers, because they are so busy, literally they don't know their kids. Many husbands and wives, they don't talk. Many of them simply, you know, some of them, they meet once a week, even though they're living under one roof, because all of them, they are busy. The man is busy with his friends, you know, the son is busy, the daughter is busy, whether in their normal busy. Now, COVID-19, you know, forced them to stay together and to start talking. Sometimes we go and chat with everyone on earth, but we don't sit with our parents. We don't sit with our close brothers. We don't know how our sisters feel. Inside my younger sister, we don't sit because we are busy. Now, from this angle, to be honest with you, I witnessed a positive impact, which was not part of our planning. It was not part of our clever. It happened, but that it just happened, which goes in parallel with some of what the Rabbi Berger said. And the last one, holidays and celebrations. Now, I connect this with the prayer. Even though when we were about to be deprived from these normal things, we starting appreciating what we used to have. Actually, because of COVID-19, for example, I finish with this. Look what happened. Actually, we developed ourselves. We updated our tools. We became our, reach for bigger, people to preach and to talk, solve the problems. We became most of us, we became experts on all kind of platforms, applications. I'm as a person, for example, in Islam, we have the Friday ceremony where we give, I'm an imam, actually. I do give the Friday khutbah, we call the Friday sermon. Now, normally you can do one Friday sermon at once in one place. I am, as a person, I used to give 3 sermons in 3 different continents in COVID-19. While sitting at home, online, I used to give the first one in Istanbul for 1,000, people on online, 6 in the morning. At 2, I used to go to Adar Foundation in Oakville to give my physical, real one. By law, we were allowed to gather just 5 if we are from the staff. I'm from the staff. So I was allowed to go there and to broadcast from the real place of ceremony for Muslims in Canada. After that, with 2 hours, I had my 3rd ceremony from the same day for Muslims in Los Angeles, another masjid. So I used to give 3 sermons for tens of thousands in the same day because of the online, because all of them, they are on lockdown. So look, now instead of reaching 1,000, we started reaching 100,000. Instead of being able to use tools to deal with a limited number, we became able to deal with nearly unlimited. So amazingly, I don't know how to put it, and I hope I will not be misunderstood, but I think, even though we have, from a human point of view, a lot of disasters in our calculations, okay? However, a lot of things by God's commandments, by God's design, by God's fate, that open a new channel for us to reconsider, to relook, to re-understand a lot of missed things in our lives. This is how I'm viewing, or I'm feeling, or understanding the impact. And sorry, I think I took more than 10 times. Very sorry.
No problem. Thank you very much, all 3 of you. I'm assuming I should hand it back to Shahab as we move into the Q&As.
Yes, so thank you. That was covering our 1 hour session, but we finished 10 minutes early, so that's good. We'll jump into the Q&A session early. So we did put together a few questions, but if Evan or Yael, if you guys received any questions on your own, feel free to ask them. And so I'll start off with the first question that we listed here. So this question is regarding young children. So how do you teach faith to young children? And what is each religion's perspective of instilling children with faith-based values? For the Q&A session, we'll have 1 to 2 minutes, but we do have a little bit of extra time, so feel free to take a couple minutes to answer the question. So I'll open it now to you guys to answer that first question.
Sorry, who's the first one? I could not hear.
It's open to all of you guys. Did you guys not hear the question? Should I repeat it?
Oh, no, I hear it. I saw. Okay, can I start?
Of course, yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay. Now, basically, how do you teach faith to young children? You know, in Islam, we have 2 basic ways. Now, you need to teach the normal of teaching, you know, talking, discussing, conveying, helping to know the knowledge, one angle. And we believe strongly in what we call the practical example, the real model. In Islam, strongly we believe in the saying that says, children, do what they see, not what you say. So the practical example, that's why we believe that one of the wisdoms behind the fact that God let Prophet Muhammad stay between the people for 23 years. It was not 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years, so that he will be a practical, applicable example for all of the teachings of Islam. So this is the first part. Now about how to plant, you know, let's say the values in the children, which is part of the same question, I believe. True? Okay, now this is, you know, this is part of what really I love to talk, and I have just 1 minute, but in a very short thing, we in Islam, to the best of my knowledge as an academic person, we believe that the basic values are not taught. We are created with a built-in ethical value system inside us, with the basic minimum requirements. What happens from Islamic point of view, that we are given the mind, the power, and what we call the fitra, the inner nature, the instinct, which contains the core values. Now, religion comes and asks those who are in charge, like parents, now to maintain, to strengthen, to grow, to raise, to make it more powerful, but not just to build it. No, it's there already. Or otherwise, as we believe in Islam, it's otherwise, you know, we can't have something called human as a common ground. We are built in a common ground of ethics, values, you know, general things, and because we came from the same source. In Islam, that's why we say, Prophet Muhammad said, each person will be born on the fitra, will be born with the natural, you know, inner nature by God. Then his parents, the society, whatever, will start to do the changing or upgrading or unfortunately destroying part of this. Finally, the example of what I'm talking, because really it's a deep topic. In Islam, my understanding, we are born with something like our bodies look like the hardware of the computer. The inner nature, which contains the values like the operating system, like Windows. So we are born with Windows, i.e. operating system, by default, by the manufacturer. However, now the office or for example, the Photoshop, for example, the Adobe family, they are like the messages. So you have the same operating system. However, you might have Office. In the Office, you might have the Word, Excel. then you have another tens of thousands of applications, but we share the same operating system. Otherwise, you can't have any kind of software to work on this computer. So we are born with this. The values are there, and many verses, they are talking that the religion came just to fix and to make it more powerful and to maintain it. Finished.
Passing it on to whoever else wanted to speak next.
I'm happy to contribute. I'm going to take a little different tact on it as an educator. I think there's three things you need to look for in a teacher. There's three skills or three traits, I think, is better. One is love of what they do. And it's much different than, let's say, a teacher who is teaching at a regular elementary school or a high school or a professorship, in the sense of there's one thing to have knowledge of such a thing and to be an expert in the thing, and that's needed too. But to a degree, there's a concept in Judaism called words that leave the heart, enter the heart. So people can tell when they're talking about things that are meaningful to them, and they live it. And therefore, Judaism is a very live it religion. We have 613 commandments, and therefore there are things to do.